Hi guys. So today's notes are going to cover the imperialism period. Is that better? Sorry. Of world history, and I'm going to try to get this done in one 15 minutes or less video. It might have to be split into two. We'll see how it goes. So imperialism is a concept that you've known for a really long time. All imperialism is the colonization process. It's when one group of people, one country, takes over another area, generally for some sort of exploitation purposes, for resources or something like that. So it's the same thing that you guys have always talked about with the American Revolution and the colonial America system. It's just it's important to note that in global history, it's been happening. It's not just when people came to the New World. It's happened all over the world for actually thousands of years. There are four main reasons for imperialism. Main reasons, right? MAIN for imperialism. One is a market for goods. So European countries and the industrialized world had created all these new products from the Industrial Revolution and the factory system. They needed a place to sell those. Unfortunately, for the cultures that live in the imperialized regions, their traditional industries are going to get displaced, are going to get taken over. And subbed out for the goods and services that are provided by the industrialized country. And as with a lot of things that we've talked about in the past, the European or American sort of white culture, Christian culture, is going to be now the top of the social structure, even though they're taking over land everywhere else. Another is to acquire resources. Particularly Japan has this as an issue where they want to industrialize, but they can't pull the resources that they need from the archipelago of Japan, so they have to expand outward to find more resources. But all the countries are doing the exact same thing. And one of the things that the British do is they go to India and grow their cotton in India, so they don't have to pay for importing it from other places like the American South. Another reason for imperialism is to introduce Christianity. It's a fairly Eurocentric, Christian-centric, racist, honestly, system that comes about where people are encouraged to travel to Africa or to Asia or to Australia purely to spread the word of God and to circumvent the indigenous populations there. But it wasn't, and I have down there the white man's burden. That was a very popular phrase that came about, was that it was the burden of the white race to colonize, industrialize, and bring these other cultures into the modern world. And it's not all bad. It's led a lot by the Jesuits that we've talked about in the past. That were the Christian missionaries from way back during the Protestant Reformation. But they also set up schools and medical facilities, especially a lot of Africa is run, the villages are run with the heart and soul of a missionary system that is providing education and medical services to the people who live nearby. And the other is nationalism. We've talked about nationalism several times. Nationalism is just pride in your country. European leaders, European government leaders wanting to expand their political clout and make their country the most powerful country in the world. Whoops, that's not what I meant to push. All right, I close it. I'll pause it and come right back. Sorry about that. I definitely clicked the wrong button that time. So there are three types of imperialism: a colony, a protectorate, and a sphere of influence. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these, but just know that these are the different styles of government takeovers that would happen. The colony is a system that you're used to. This is the American system, right, that happened in the 13 colonies. Also, we've talked about Mexico in the past. Mexico was a Spanish colony. Brazil was a Portuguese colony. That concept where people move from Europe, or really anywhere, but in this case, move from Europe to the New World and create their own sort of like, it's like extending the country entirely. The land was claimed by the king, the languages, the laws, all that were all part of the same country. It displaces the foreign government. Whatever was there is totally gone. And you can think about that, like you think, that when the English settlers came to Jamestown, the people who lived in Jamestown operated as if they were still living in England, even though they were living across the Atlantic Ocean, and that the native tribes that lived there had no jurisdiction over them. The next one is a protectorate. You can see the word protect in the word protectorate. So the foreign power gives military protection in exchange for trade. The existing government stays in power. So, for instance, in Vietnam, the local Vietnamese government stayed in power, but they were directly tied to the French government. They did trade, and they also had military alliances and that sort of thing. They operated with connection to the French government, but instead of the French claiming Vietnam as France, instead of France ruling it directly, they left the local Vietnamese government in power. And the last one is the sphere of influence. And so the government stays in place and there's no foreign control, but you have an exclusive trade agreement. This happens in China. It also happens in Japan. But this is where the entire region has one country that's allowed to trade with them. So it happens in China as part of China's attempts to limit the influence of foreign countries on their people. All right, so the scramble for Africa. Sorry, I'm going to put my glasses on for a quick little time check. We're doing great. Is the concept that all of the European countries, you can see from this map, you have Portugal and Italy and Germany and Great Britain and Belgium and France and Spain. All of these countries were trying to grab up all the land in Africa that they can. This is a man who's representing England or the British Empire. And you can see he has 1 foot here in Egypt and 1 foot here in South Africa, and he's expanding the whole thing. England controlled both of those pieces of property as well as many, many, many others in the continent of Africa. Almost the entire continent by the 1800s is completely controlled by outside forces. So what happened is that there was a lot of border disputes, and not like border disputes where the Africans who were living there were successfully fighting off these British invaders, which is happens occasionally but very rarely. But what it was a border dispute amongst the Europeans. So the European leaders met at the Berlin Conference. So in Germany, a bunch of European leaders got together, and you can see from this political cartoon, they carved up Africa, the continent of Africa, into multiple slices. They literally sat down and they redrew out boundary lines and border lines, not paying a lick of attention to the people who were already living there, the cultures that were already living there, these powerful kingdoms that have been there for eons, and instead according to the land grabs and the land holdings of the European powers. So what it did is that in some countries, it combined two historically warring groups, and in other places, it divided up traditional tribes and traditional kingdoms. So it's just a hot mess of Europeans completely ignoring the fact that there are other people that had claim to that land and had been living there, and it was rightfully theirs. So one example of the imperialist policies being fought off in Africa itself is the Boer Wars. So the Boer Wars are in the late 1800s. They happen in South Africa, the country of South Africa. And it's a war not between the South Africans and the British or the South Africans and the Dutch, but a war between the Dutch and the British, but in South Africa. I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but those two countries are very, very, very close to each other in Europe. They're just across the English Channel from each other. And instead of just maintaining this like European problem, they fought a war in the very bottom of an entirely different continent. It's a crazy mashup of turn of events. Right. Another thing that happens is the Suez Canal gets built. This is a part of the industrial period, and it's also a part of England trying to get to India faster, because India is where all the money is being made in Britain. And if you traveled along Da Gama's route, right, we talked about Da Gama coming from Portugal way, way back in the age of exploration. If you go around this way, it's approximately 12,300 miles, right? So what they do is they dig a canal. They recognize, the British recognize that if they could cut through to the Red Sea from the Mediterranean, you could cut off about 5,100 miles. And that's a huge shift, right? So they build the Suez Canal. And these are two pictures of the Suez Canal, one from like a satellite image, and that's just a picture of what the Suez Canal looks like. But they cut that off, and they successfully make the trip then from India to Britain significantly faster. All right. So we're going to talk about in Asia how they overthrew some of those systems. So the first is the Boxer Rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion happens in Beijing, where I just spelled Beijing wrong. Sorry about that. This is BEI. But a group of Chinese nationalists, they had this society where they were learning martial arts, and they believed that the martial arts that they learned would protect them from bullets. And they were, the English called them the Boxers. But they rebelled in the trade district, the financial district of China, and lots and lots and lots of people die as the martial artists go up against the very real, very modern weapons of places like the United Kingdom and Russia and France, as well as a lot of other countries. So lots and lots of people die in that. But it does show that like China's trying to fight back against these European oppressors. And another one is the East India Company and the situation in India. So India is a British colony, and they were being controlled by the British East India Trading Company, which had been in place, had taken over starting in the 1700s from the local kingdoms in India. And one of the things that happens is called the Sepoy Mutiny. So a Sepoy was a Indian or were Indian soldiers who worked for the East India Trading Company, trying to enforce the policies of the East India Trading Company, because they're not just a business; they're now running the government. And they got a new kind of rifle cartridge, and this was just the straw that breaks the camel's back. But there's this rumor that the rifle cartridges are coated in grease made from pigs and from cows. Well, those are like moral sins to the Muslim and Hindu people living in India, and so that was sort of the piece of time where they started rebelling. And thousands of people are killed in this attempt by the Sepoys to overthrow the East India Company. It's not successful in that the Indians don't get their own independence, and they have to then form a political party, and they start using the rights of the British citizenry in order to overthrow a lot of the colonial government problems. But it was successful in that it got rid of the harshness of the rule of the East India Company, because the East India Company is disbanded as a result of this debacle of the mutiny. All right, so Japan, you have your little Matthew Perry up here playing. So what you're going to have is Japan being isolationist, and their goal was to remain isolationist, but the United States under Matthew Perry, who was a Commodore and who was not this Matthew Perry, but a very different one, we created a trade blockade where we basically said we're not going to allow anything in and out of your harbor until you agree to sign this document and open up your borders to trade with us. So we created that trade alliance. This is where I'm going to stop for now. I've only got a couple more, so we're going to give you an imperialism part 2 in just a minute. All right, thanks. And if you have any questions, let me know.